Have you ever wondered why silence scares you? Why, when the world finally shuts up, does your mind scream even louder? We live surrounded by noises, notifications, expectations, comparisons. Everything requires our attention. But what about you? When was the last time you heard the sound of your own truth? There is a world inside you waiting to be heard. It is not a world of ready answers, but of sincere questions. That is where your essence resides, not in the opinions of others, nor in the applause of networks, but in the calmness of those who decide finally to reconnect with what is real. In this video, you will rediscover yourself. You will learn to silence the noise from outside to listen, perhaps for the first time in a long time, to the voice that matters, yours. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotions. It is about anchoring itself when everything around it seems to revolve. It is about cultivating a fertile silence, where every thought turns to seed, and every choice a root. Before we begin, leave in the comments the phrase that can mark the beginning of this turn. Today, I start building myself, not distracting me. Don't underestimate the power of that phrase. Writing it is an intimate and courageous gesture. It is declaring that you are ready to stop being hostage to the noise and start building, with intent and presence, your best version. Get ready. This will not be an ordinary video. This is a return, an excavation, a reunion with what in you was never noise. It was just forgotten. Number 1, the key is inside you. There is a moment when everything out there seems to continue at the same pace. The voices, the demands, the comparisons, but inside you, something begins to crack. It is subtle at first, a nuisance when waking up, a nameless restlessness, a feeling that, however moving, it is always in the same place. And here comes the silence, not that imposed by circumstances, but that which is born of the tiredness of pretending, of smiling when you are exhausted, of agreeing when you want to leave, of gradually trying to be what you expect. That's the breaking point, but it's also the beginning of everything. Stoicism leads us inside when everything seems to drag us out. It does not offer a refuge to escape from the world, but a mirror where, without masks, we can find ourselves again. Because there is only true strength in those who know their inner territory, with their shadows, yes, but also with a light that the world has not yet seen. Have you noticed that most of your energy goes to maintain appearances? To please, to prove, to justify? The day passes, and you feel drained, even without having lived something truly of yours. This happens because you have fed a version of yourself that is not born of essence, but of expectation. And what feeds on superficiality weakens inside. There is an old, simple but profound thought that reminds us of this. The soul is shaped according to what it consumes. And if you keep ingesting noises, pressures, and masks, you will lose your taste for the truth itself. When you turn to yourself with courage, you begin to realize how many noises are occupying spaces that could be present. It's not that the world needs to be silent. It's you who need to learn to listen to what you've been saying for so long. What really matters. And that only happens when you allow yourself to stop. Breathe. If you ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid with so much noise? In this process, you begin to recognize old patterns, the haste to please, the fear to disappoint, the guilt to set limits. And you understand that many of these behaviors were born when you didn't know you had a choice. Now you know. And knowing is the first step to transform. Stoicism teaches us that life is not about controlling what happens to us, but about choosing how we respond to each situation. But how do we do this if we don't even know what we feel? If we live in automatic, jumping from distraction to distraction? The answer is in silence. Because it is in silence that the layers fall, that the ego shuts up, that the soul responds. And when you listen attentively, honestly, realize something powerful. The world reflects your inner state, the relationships that repeat themselves, the errors that accumulate, the cycles that never end. All of this is manifestation of something that pulses inside and asks for healing. The external world is a mirror, and your reflection now calls for change. The key is in your hands, but it doesn't open doors in the world. It opens passages inside you, and once it's open, there's no more pretending that you don't know, that you don't feel, that you don't need to change. From today, feed on your presence, truly, on purpose, and see how the world around you begins to adjust, not because you forced it to change, but because you returned to its center, and everything that is real starts from there. Number 2, what distracts you dominates you. There are noises so constant around us that they become invisible. Routine camouflaged noises. Information that accumulate without leaving anything. Stimulations that gradually silence the only voice that really matters, yours. Epicteto offers us a disconcerting truth. Those who think they already know do not learn anymore. And there is a subtle and devastating way to stop learning, to live distracted. When you are constantly reacting to what comes, there is no room to observe what is born inside. There is no listening. There is no discernment. You become a passive vessel of other voices. Distraction is not just a harmless habit. It is an emotional architecture designed to keep you away from yourself. Every automatic click, every unintended scroll, every empty conversation that occupies more than delivery, all of this will wear off the bond between you and your essence. It will fill your mind with interference until you no longer know what your thought is and what is just the echo of the world. Stoicism teaches us that freedom is not an absence of obligations, but mastery of what influences your mind. And this is where the turning point lies. It is not just about turning off your phone or running away from technology. It is about choosing what deserves to go through the gate of your attention. Because your attention is what is most precious. It shapes your beliefs, your emotions, your decisions. Do you realize how often distractions come disguised as necessity? I need to see this. I have to answer that. I cannot miss that news. But all this is noise that is urgently dressed to seem important. And what is urgent almost always takes you away from what is essential. On a common day, how many decisions do you make with a real presence? How many times do you stop, breathe, and choose with intent what you will consume? Who you will talk to? What will you tell yourself? And how many times do you just react on the autopilot, running after things you don't even know why you started? The distraction steals you silently, and when you finally realize it, you're tired, you're empty, you're confused, and you don't know why. But the answer is in this almost imperceptible habit of never being whole in the now, of being always divided between what you do and what you think, between what you feel and what you show. Returning inside is therefore an act of courage, because in silence there is no distraction to protect you from the truth. You listen to your fears, your insecurities, but also listen to your clarity, your intuition, your forgotten strength. It is in this space that reconstruction begins. That is where you learn what you already knew, but had silenced with excessive noise. Epicteto provokes us to recognize that the "I already know" is the beginning of stagnation. But what if you began to doubt what you think you need? What if you began to question why so haste, so urgent, so dependent on stimulation? What would you discover in the interval between one distraction and another? Whoever learns to protect your attention, learns to protect your soul. And whoever dominates what consumes begins to dominate who he becomes. Because in the end, what distracts you not only takes you away from your essence, he takes control. He decides for you. He leads you while you believe you are in charge. What if, as of today, you decided to choose carefully everything that comes in? Who talks to you? What you read? What you allow to echo? How would you change the silence you hear inside? Number 3, the mind is not an enemy. It is a landscape to be cultivated. There are days when the mind looks like a locked, dark room, muffled by voices that don't stop talking. They say you're not enough. that you're going to fail again. That's too late. You try to ignore, change the subject, open a window, but the feeling remains. An internal weight and fatigue that the body doesn't explain. And then, gradually you start to wonder, why does my mind always seem to be against me? It is here that Stoic philosophy whispers a disconcerting truth. The mind is not the problem. The problem is the way you let it grow. Heracles, one of the least remembered masters of Stoicism, offers us a way. The mind needs to be watched with serenity to become an ally. To ignore it is to leave it in the hands of chaos. The mind, by nature, is fertile. It generates images, stories, interpretations. It does not shut up because it was made to process the world. But if you do not take care of what it processes, it devours you. An isolated thought has no strength, but a repeated thought with emotion becomes belief, and a belief turns into behavior, in routine, in identity. Without realizing it, you begin to live not what you want, but what you fear. Some say they need to stop thinking so much, but the thought is not the villain. What exhausts is not thinking, it is thinking without direction. It is living in an internal monologue that has never been questioned. It has never been listened to in depth. Stoicism does not propose absolute silence. It proposes consciousness, discipline, pace. Cultivating the mind is not to silence it. It is to learn to filter, selecting which ideas deserve your attention and which are just echoes of a past that no longer sustains itself. It is like taking care of a garden. If you do not plant with intent, the bush takes over. If you do not rip off what suffocates, nothing blooms. And how to do that? Start with the most underestimated gesture. Listen. Sit with yourself and listen to what your mind is trying to say. Not to agree with everything, but to understand what is behind. Fear, guilt, tired? The more you listen with presence, the more internal screams turn into understandable words. The second step is to choose. Yes, to choose. You can choose a new thought, a new interpretation, a new narrative. You can choose to look at a mistake and see learning. You can look at a wound and see strength. You can finally choose to build an internal voice that does not repeat the judgment of the world, but that is refuge in the midst of it. The mind will keep talking, always, but in time it will learn that you are not hostage. You are presence, and that is what transforms you. When you occupy your mind with lucidity, it stops occupying you with torment. It becomes landscape, fertile soil, creation space. Heracles knew, the mind is a field. You can leave it to abandonment or you can sow. And contrary to what they say, it's never too late to start caring. Number 4, excess is the new prison. The human soul, when overwhelmed, does not scream. It retracts. And this silent retraction camouflages well in modern life. It seems common tiredness, fleeting discouragement, but it is something else. It is the weight of overcommitment, of commitments assumed without conviction, of accumulated objects that have no more meaning, of desires that have been added without ever going through the essential question. Does this still serve me? Musonio Rufus, among the wisest of the Stoics, went straight to the point that many avoid. The search for peace requires a constant pruning. Simplifying desires is not backward. It is refining. It is purifying what matters from what just fills space. And perhaps that is why we feel so often exhausted, even surrounded by comfort and possibilities. It is not the absence that sickens us. It is the excess of what no longer belongs to us. There is a subtle difference between having and sustaining. Having something can be light, but supporting what has already lost meaning becomes a burden. It is not just material goods. It is bonds, ideas, versions of ourselves that perpetuate ourselves by habit, by fear, by attachment to what has one day made sense. The problem is not in possessing. It is in not knowing the moment to give up. The mind, when too busy, loses the ability to discern what is essential. And without discernment, we accumulate by impulse. We put one more goal in the agenda. We accept one more expectation. We carry one more identity. Gradually, we lose the sharpness of who we are. And what was meant to be a full life turns into an impossible equation to balance. Stoicism proposes the opposite of unconscious consumption: presence. It asks us to look honestly at the way we wish. Let us investigate the source of the impulse before serving it. Because many of our desires are not ours. They were inherited, imitated, absorbed by constant contact with a world that sells urgency as if it were freedom. To simplify is, first of all, to regain space, to breathe, to listen, to choose with more truth. When you clean, when you release, when you allow something to end, you are not losing. You are opening passage. You are offering your life the chance to be led by something more authentic than the fear of absence, the courage of presence. It is not easy to release what has been part of your identity for years. Sometimes the idea of who you believe you are is totally linked to what you have, to what you represent, to what you repeat. But no construction, however old it is, must be maintained if it prevents the expansion of what is alive within you. It may seem counterintuitive in a world that values accumulation, but the human soul flourishes better in spaces where it can move with freedom. And freedom is this: not carrying what does not expand you. Do not keep what no longer talks with your truth. Do not insist on what is sustained only by fear of emptiness. Lightness is not born of escape. It is the result of the choice to walk with what matters. And to know what matters, it takes silence, observation, courage. Number 5. True intelligence is needing a little light. There are silences that release and silences that oppress. The first happens when you realize that nothing else needs to be said because everything that matters is already present. The second, when what is missing weighs more than what still exists. Knowing the difference between these two silences is an art, and it begins when you begin to measure your own strength, not by the amount of what you have, but by the lightness of what you can leave behind. Behind everyday anxiety, there is almost always an accumulation of tasks, desires, stacked goals. All of this is presented as construction, but in excess it reveals the opposite. It is noise. A subtle confusion between progress and haste, between development and dependence. The unbroken desire for more, even if disguised as ambition, is often just mistrust fear. Fear of not being enough, of not being up to it, of being forgotten if it stops showing. But what if the real strength is not in reaching one more step, but in knowing when to sit, breathe, and say, "Is it enough?" Stoic philosophy insists on a point that the modern world rejects. Power is not in accumulation, but in the domain of desire. Mastering does not mean denying or repressing. It means observing, with clarity, what in you is desiring for the simple impulse to escape from now. Because there is a kind of wanting that is not born of genuine will, but of comparison, distraction, and fear of being left behind. To ask for less of life is not to give up on it. It is to trust that what truly sustains your soul does not buy, does not show, does not measure. It is the peace of those who do not depend on the next victory to feel worthy, the next company to feel loved, the next answer to feel safe. This independence does not scream, does not appear, does not perform, but when it settles, it transforms everything. There is a profound freedom to look at what you have, what you live for, and feel that it is enough, not as a conformism, but as a meeting, a return to what is essential, and that has almost always been ignored in the search for everything that the world has said you should want. And when that return happens, a new force is born, the strength of those who do not need it, from those who walk because they want it, and not because they fear to stop. How many times did you notice yourself supporting relationships, habits or goals, just for fear of emptying too much. How many times did you feel that something was consuming you, but it continued, because it was easier to follow what it weighs than to face the emptiness of letting go? The truth is that not every void needs to be filled. Some were made to breathe. The real strength is to simplify, not by escape, but by wisdom, not because the world has told you to reduce, but because you have learned to distinguish what it fills from what it occupies. And that requires presence. It requires attention. It requires a kind of courage that is not learned in books, but in the silence that comes after every difficult choice. When you learn to live with little and yet feel whole, nothing the world takes away can break you, and nothing he offers will be able to buy you. Number 6. Not everything that affects you is about you. There are times when the body reacts even before you understand why. The breast squeezes with a message read in haste. The face warms up in front of a criticism. The heart accelerates when something or someone ignores you. And at that moment when the emotion arises, the instinct tries to take control. You defend yourself, counterattacks, closes or shrinks, everything without actually understanding what is happening, as if the pain speaks faster than reason. Rufus's brief and cutting teaching illuminates this trap. Do not trust the first impression. What hurts you may not be aiming at you. What worries you may be just reflecting something badly solved within the other. The world does not revolve around your wounds, and not all the words that touch you have been made to reach you. The problem is that in many of us, there is a silent custom, that of taking everything personally. Someone walks away, and we immediately think that we fail. Someone does not praise, and we think that we disappoint. Someone criticizes, and we already assume that we are being attacked. But that way of interpreting the world is a broken mirror. It distorts everything, and in the reflection we see only our multiplied insecurities. Stoicism teaches us to distrust the impulse. The pause is the sacred space where the reaction gives way to understanding. When you learn not to respond immediately, not to buy as truth everything you feel abruptly, something reorganizes. The emotion will still come, because we are human, but it will no longer be your tyrant. It will be a sign, an invitation to deeper listening. The key is to realize that not everything that hurts reveals something new. Sometimes it only confirms what you already carry. And what you carry, when not observed, becomes filter. It is through this filter that you begin to interpret the world, with excessive caution, with distrust, with fear of rejection. But the world is not always talking about you. Most of the time, it is just being itself. How many arguments are born out of bad words? How many relationships fall apart because we react to assumptions? How many times have you found yourself stuck to a hurt that after a while didn't even make sense anymore? Reacting less is not being indifferent. It's being selective. It's saving energy for what really matters. It's not turning each other's gesture into a sentence about its value. To be stoic is not to be cold. It is to be deep. It is to understand that emotions are messengers, not bossy. And that often the impression that hurts is just the touch of an old wound. The criticism that hurts perhaps not even about you, but your fear of not being enough has worn it as a suit of armor. The silence of the other may not be refusal, but your need has turned it into rejection. Learning to investigate what we feel is one of the greatest acts of inner freedom. It is to stop being hostage to reactions and start cultivating choices. Choosing how to interpret that guide, choosing what to save, choosing what to let go, and above all, choosing what really deserves to echo within you. Not everything is about you. Not every absence is abandonment. Not every criticism is devaluation. Not every look is judgment. The world continues to move with or without its interpretations. And you strengthen as you learn to let go of what once paralyzed you. Number 7. What unbalances you reveals where there is still no root. There is a kind of agitation that is not seen from the outside, but that consumes from the inside. A constant restlessness, as if something was always about to go wrong. The waiting for a criticism, the tension before a change, the discomfort in not controlling what comes next. Behind this anguish there is almost always an unrecognized fragility, a point within you that has not yet found firm ground. Aeneas of Gaza, reflecting on human disturbances, pointed to the place where everything begins. It is not the fact that we are shaken, but the reading that we make of it. This reading, in turn, is not born from the present moment, but from a whole history of experiences, beliefs, and traumas that shape the way we react to what escapes us. Perhaps you have already wondered why certain things take you so far off the axis, while others deal with the same scenario with an almost disconcerting serenity. The answer is not at the event, but at the root. What unbalances you shows where there is still dependence, where there is still fear, where there is still a hidden expectation that reality will adapt to your desires. But the world is not meant to comfort you. It moves according to its own laws, and what it is for you is not to mold it, but to strengthen yourself inside to inhabit it more fully. The root, in this context, is all that sustains your presence even when circumstances fail. It is the inner axis that does not swing to the taste of the wind. And it only grows when you accept that some pains do not need to be avoided. They need to be crossed with conscience. How many times have you tried to control the other so as not to feel abandonment? How many times have you planned every detail not to face frustration? How many times have you yielded to avoid the discomfort of being misinterpreted? Each of these strategies, although understandable, reveals an unstable soil, an attempt to protect yourself rather than take root. Stoicism offers a different way. Instead of running away from what destructures us, it proposes that we look firmly at what still makes us tremble. Not to harden, but to understand. Because self-knowledge does not occur only in tranquility. It deepens even in the shaking, as long as the mind is awake. Root is presence without demand. It is when you do not need everything to be calm, to keep calm. It is when your peace does not depend on the conduct of others, the financial stability, or the predictability of tomorrow. And you only discover that space when you stop negotiating your serenity with the outsider. When you stop saying, "I'll only be well if," and come to recognize that the true condition of peace is not a condition. It is to accept that the world has no obligation to be light, and yet you can choose lightness. What unbalances you today is a disguised invitation, a clear sign of where it is necessary to deepen your gaze, and there is no shame in perceiving yourself fragile. Shame is in remaining shallow for fear of facing the roots of your own suffering. The force you seek is not to control the wind, but to put your feet firmly on the ground that sustains you, even when everything swings. I sincerely hope that this message has been helpful. I sincerely want to congratulate you for coming this far and completing the video. That means that you want to improve as a person. If you liked the video, leave your comment. If you don't know what to say, comment gratitude. Then I'll know that you've watched until the end. If you're not already on the channel, what are you waiting for? Sign up now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings like this, which are applicable to our everyday life. Therefore, I encourage you to continue learning about this philosophy. I leave here 2 videos full of Stoic wisdom so you can continue learning. Until next.